Hi, my name is Dr. Rona Halualani, and this is a special customized slidecast for the University of Alabama in terms of the diversity mapping project that my team and I are going to be conducting for you. So this slidecast will highlight some of the key things about the methodology and what we do and next steps and how it can help your campus. So, diversity mapping is something that my team and I developed in 2007. So, really almost 9 years ago to this date. And it's a specific research methodology, it's really a diversity methodology that is similar to asset mapping. And asset mapping is something where you analyze a particular organization or you analyze a particular setting and you identify what are the current resources, what are the current strengths, what are the institutional or organizational behaviors and routines in relation to a particular theme. And that's what diversity mapping is that we really go in and we look at all of the things that University of Alabama has done in the last 5 years in relation to diversity and inclusion. What are your current resources and things that you're doing well? What are some areas or gaps or zones that are empty that you really need to kind of focus and concentrate more of your effort on? And what have been your habits and routines over the last 5 years? We created this diversity mapping methodology as a way to inform higher educational institutions so that you can create meaningful diversity action and targeted strategy. And I guess at this point, I should say that diversity mapping is different from doing a campus climate study. So, a campus climate study and diversity mapping are really two sides of a coin. Campus climate looks at the subjective experiences, the felt experiences, the lived experiences of your campus members. And typically, campus climate surveys are done every 2 or 3 years at individual campuses. Students have a particular survey, faculty have a particular survey, and staff and leadership have a particular survey about what their experiences are on the campus and in relation to diversity. That is not this. So, we are really not a campus climate instrument firm. Instead, we're the other side of the coin that looks at the organizational practices and what you've actually done with regard to diversity and inclusion. And for us, this is to open up campus conversations, campus kind of directions and recommendations for diversity, inclusion, and learning, and what can be done to improve yourself in that area. Because everybody, all institutions, all organizations can chart more positive directions in that area and strive to do more. So the background for me, I am the managing principal and founder of Halualani Associates. I'm actually a professor. I have been for the last 17, 18 years at San Jose State University, my home institution. I'm a professor of intercultural communication and diversity. I'm a full professor with tenure. And I received my PhD from Arizona State University in intercultural communication in 1998. And for about 2.5 to 3 years, I was the chief diversity officer and I was actually the special assistant of institutional planning, strategic planning, and inclusive excellence at San Jose State University. And I reported directly to the president. And it was during this time in that role, and my campus is about 30,000 strong, very diverse students, very large. We're in a diverse regional area. But at the time, my campus talked a lot about diversity and didn't really feel like they did anything in terms of university initiatives, or they didn't really plan and strategize about diversity in such a way. So what we did is I was asked then to join the office of the president, and that president, former President Don Cassing, wanted me to come up with the first ever diversity master plan. And it was actually the first diversity master plan of the California State University system, which is the 23 campus system that San Jose State belongs to and is the oldest campus of. And we didn't really know where to start, my graduate students and I at the time, because there was so much going on. We would hear about practices and traditions and programs, and then we would go look them up, and we had seen that they were no more because that individual had left the university. that superhero who took it on themselves to create this amazing diversity program, had left the university. And when they left, those diversity efforts went away. And it's not a sustainable organizational structure when we base our diversity efforts on people as opposed to infrastructure and strategy. So we said, why don't we map everything that our campus has done with anything to do with diversity and inclusion? We would set that as a broad kind of search over the last, decade. And that's what we did. We came up with a methodology during that time where we mapped over 200, 300 efforts for San Jose State so that we knew what the right hand was doing apart from the left hand. We knew what every division and unit was doing on that campus so that we could have a more holistic picture of what was going on so that we knew where we needed to go next. What would our aspiration be for those next steps? And that's where this diversity mapping really came about. Um, our diversity mapping methodology really focuses on the areas in blue. So all of these bullets that you're seeing in front of you relate to aspects of diversity in higher ed that are typically focused on. Things like access and enrollment, so recruitment issues, the demographics of your student population, your faculty population, your staff population, your leadership, which is all very, very important. And faculty especially are very important because they occupy a really special role and a really special connection with our students. Retention, college completion, and graduation, I mean, that's really where the focus is in higher ed right now. And campus climate, as I talked to you before, in terms of member experiences and whatnot. Our diversity mapping focuses again on the blue items right below, which are the institutional actions and strategies that have been done with regard to diversity, the institutional commitment and investment in diversity. So diversity isn't going to happen by natural osmosis. It's not going to happen by us willing it into place or thinking it's just going to evolve. Institutions really actually have to plan out and really work hard to execute meaningful programs and practices in that area. And we also see diversity as a learning outcome and a goal or a knowledge domain. And we'll be looking at your curricula, all of your courses. And we see diversity is not just, a part of someone's identity or a part of an experience or who you are and where you come from, but also the ways in which we understand and traverse different perspectives, the ways in which we challenge comfortable thoughts and beliefs. Are we giving exposure to groups, areas, experiences, questions, philosophies, methodologies, disciplinary areas that don't get a lot of airplay, that don't get a lot of airtime, that don't get a lot of focus on in the curriculum? And that really frames diversity in a larger way. Diversity mapping for us, we started in 2007, and since then, this firm, Halualani Associates, and we're just a small, tiny firm made up really of faculty who love to teach, who love to do great research, especially this kind of research, mapping research, benchmarking research, structural research. And we've mapped over 45 higher educational institutions, small size campuses, mid-sized, large size, over 20, 30,000 students. We have mapped entire university systems. We have mapped secular, public, private, and actually several faith-based institutions. So we feel like our range, and two-year community colleges, two-year technical colleges. I believe we're the first ones in your kind of conference in terms of looking at University of Alabama in your conference. You're our first institution that we're looking at in your conference, but we've looked at many, many other campuses. So over the last, I'd argue, 9 years, we've executed and refined and continue to refine this mapping methodology to really bring insights and to share them with you so that you can create meaningful diversity action for the future as an institution as going forward. This is kind of an early mock-up of what our maps look like, which are visual graphical representations of what divisions are doing in every unit, and we try to make sense of those with interesting analytics. So we've written a couple of articles about our mapping process, one in the Journal of Higher Education Policy and Management. And I believe Jennifer Greer at your institution has those links, as well as something for AAC&U. Dr. Sylvia Hurtado and I wrote a piece connecting diversity mapping in terms of the institution and campus climate, which is actually a very wonderful, tight knit relationship. Remember the two sides of the same coin. And so that was written for AAC&U. Remember, diversity mapping, we're going to stop doing it when it no longer is tied to strategy. This is not just to do it for research's sake, for data collection's sake. This is really to do it so that it leads to meaningful action, so that it leads to meaningful improvement. We only delineate the actual diversity efforts that an institution has engaged in, not what an institution thought they did, not what they remember that they did, not what they hope to do, but rather what they actually have done. And we look at all diversity plans if you have them. We look at all diversity roles. We look at all efforts, financial aid, community programs, first year experiences if it relates, trainings and workshops. We look at programs, courses, all courses across all disciplines and all efforts across every unit and division of the campus. Is completely university wide. We take stock of the actual efforts, as I mentioned before, and people really do use our maps as a baseline, kind of like the before shot, before you do a cleanse or before you take on a fitness regimen. This is what the mapping is it's really allowed to be kind of like that pre-test, the baseline mapping. We oftentimes get asked to come back to do post mappings or kind of an after shot, especially after a campus has engaged in a diversity strategy. And, you could compile, and I know that you do these annual reports every year where, all of your units, programs, and divisions send in and submit, this is everything we've done, right? And you have all that information. Now, you easily could compile that and you can put them in a spreadsheet. But for us, we go further. We take it, we make visual representations, but more importantly, we apply 23 to 25 analytical layers to each effort. So it's like holding up each effort into the light and trying to look at it in 23 to 25 different angles. Who's it for? What's the definition of diversity being engaged? How long is this effort? Is it institutionalized? Is it program driven? Is it a university-wide basis? What's the target kind of range of the students? Which specific groups are being targeted? What constituencies? Like what are the themes that are involved in this? What is this? Is this a committee? Is it a task force? Is it a retention program? Those are the kinds of layers that we apply to it. And again, we identify, and I come from a system where there's not a lot of new money. I'm knee deep in public higher education. I have been for my whole career. After I got my PhD and I was lucky enough to get this wonderful job at San Jose State University, my home institution, an institution my father graduated from, no less. And that's my only institution. It's my first job. It's going to be my last job. And it's public higher education, not a lot of new money. We at one time had furloughs, just a challenging situation. And I know that you all understand that, being that you're public higher ed as well. So we don't have a lot of new money to repurpose new efforts and initiatives. So for us, the mapping initially was to look at what do we already do that we could leverage a little bit more. What do we also do really well that suits us well for the future? So we're going to look at that for the University of Alabama to see what are your current leverage points? What are your strong platforms now? What are the opportunities? I'm an optimist. What are the things that maybe you haven't been able to do or you haven't put your energies on, because we can't do everything and anything all of the time. We don't have enough time, money, or people to do it all. But what are those empty zones and what are the ones that should be focused on? In our mapping methodology, again, we look at efforts, which I'll explain in a moment. We look at every course, so undergraduate, graduate, across every department, discipline, and college. And we even look at your general education, which is one of my research specialties. I'm in charge of the GE diversity main course in my main department and have had a lot of involvement in the diversity area in terms of GE on our campus, the upper division GE diversity courses. So we're going to look at all three of those for your university. We're going to look at a 5-year review period. It's a 5-year out, and there's a recency effect with it. We know that from 2011, 2016 is really where we're going to look at your efforts, your habits, your organizational behaviors. It's also true that because 2011 through 2016, we have already seen references to a history before 2011, references to a history, well into the early 2000s and earlier. And of course, we will, be looking into that larger historical context too. But in terms of what actually goes on the maps, those will be the specific things from 2011 to 2016. We had to kind of make a 5-year cutoff just to make sure it was recent, to give it a little bit of context, but to really work with where you are right now. So here are some things to know. Diversity efforts, excuse me, are basically everything that's not a course. It is those financial aid scholarships that are for historically underrepresented students. It is a safe zone training for LGBTQIA students. It is any affinity group for any diverse group on your campus. It could be one of your many student organizations, right? Because student organizations are really important and they're student initiated, that serve a specific identity or experience related to your students on your campus. Those would all be considered diversity efforts, right? There has to be kind of a link to diversity and inclusion in some way. And then diversity courses are all of your current catalog year academic class offerings across the university. Undergrad, graduate, every department, every discipline, every college, not just the usual suspects. I teach the usual suspects. I teach the intercultural communication and identity and justice courses. We look at everything. We look at the intro courses, core subject matter, all of it. And we like to look at not just the courses and how they're described. We love to look at syllabi. We love to look at assignments. We sometimes are able to look at paper assignments, performance rubrics, anything that ethically and legally we're allowed to look at. It gives us a better sense of what's going on in your curriculum. We do not define diversity at the outset. The reason why we don't is we would rather cast our net wide and then bring everything in, if it has to do with race, if it has to do with ethnicity, if it has to do with language, region, disabilities, if it has to do with regional origin, if it has to do with international, national identity, socioeconomic status, intersectionalities, transgender, religion, political ideology, all of those things, we want to pull all of that in and really rely on our analytical layers to make meaningful sense of what all of that is saying. And I feel that has really enriched our mapping methodology. We use 75 search terms related to diversity, culture, and inclusion, all the key terms I just mentioned: culture, intercultural, diversity, race, racial, gender, feminist, political, religion, everything. And we use that to do our mapping. And I guess our litmus test is if an effort indicates that it's for a diverse demographic or for a diverse group, we pull that in. If it's to a specific diverse audience, we pull that in. If the content is actually about diversity or a diverse area or a diverse identity, we pull that in as well. So we kind of have that range, that litmus test that we use to decide what we're pulling in and out. And because we've done this for so many years, we feel really strong that we're being rigorous about it, but that we're also being inclusive. So here are kind of our steps in our methodology, because there is a systematic, which is really what a good methodology does, is that it's a systematic delineation or plotting or examination of an area. And so I live in the Silicon Valley. I live around the corner from Google. So we do a lot of search engine optimization, web scraping, and we look at University of Alabama's digital footprint. So basically everything that has been placed in connection to the University of Alabama, whether it's through your website, through all of your departmental and program sites, through any of your social media, affiliated actually with any of your students, student organizations, any program, any office, any newspaper outlet, we pull that. We predominantly rely on institutional documents, but we pull as much information through our web scraping process to make sense of any kind of diversity effort. And if it gives us the clue or the name of something or the year of something, it allows us to look deeper and deeper. We have really perfected this practice so much so that we keep some statistics for ourselves in terms of how much do we scrape before we ask the campus that we need some help in finding in particular areas. And it's about 80 to 90%. We're able to roughly scrape 75 to 80, even as far high as 90, 95% of what already is currently in existence at the institution. And then we really kind of ask the institution to help us find things we're not able to find. The reason why we do this is we want to front load the work. I'm a faculty member. I believe that when you hire consultants, that it shouldn't be, the burden should not be placed on you all to give us, 300-page reports. Um, for us, we want to front load the work because you're all extremely busy. And then, of course, we want to engage you to participate and to help us out and get involved, but really at a time where it makes sense, when we've scraped kind of everything and we kind of know the larger lay of the land and the landscape, and then we need help. Like, we can't find something over here, and we can't find something over here. Can you help us out? Can you give us some clues? And many institutions are really amenable to that. So that works out really well. One of the ways in which we get campus involvement is through the second bullet, the Campus Information Diversity Efforts Informational Form or Survey. It's a Qualtrics survey. It's very informational. It's an open access web link. And it doesn't ask any demographics of you individually as a participant. It's totally voluntary, but it really invites campus participants, students, faculty members, staff members, even alumni, leadership to share any diversity effort that they've been involved with or that they know about. And that gives us clues about things to search for on our end or things we may not have known about. And we like to run things through Campus IRB. I feel like IRB and human subjects research is changing rapidly on the national scene, which is a good thing. And so even though we're kind of an outside firm, we will want to run it through your Campus IRB just to make sure that that informational survey is recognized by your campus, that it's legitimate, that the rights are protected. But again, it's an open access link. It's not sent to you through your specific email address. Anyone can fill it out. You could fill it out more than once, and it's very, very open, and it does not violate any privacy rights. We put all of that information together and we enter it into our spreadsheets, and we look at the 23 to 25 analytical layers through it. We apply those analytics to it, and then we create the kind of these larger visual representation maps through a program called Concept Draw. I specifically look at those maps and our analytics, and I come up with kind of what are the insights, what is all this information telling us, and then we make a recommendation in terms of your future directions for diversity. In terms of the data collected on the courses, we look at all of your course offerings. We look at your learning objectives, your syllabi, your assignments. There is another instrument that's an open access link specifically for faculty. It's an instrument that I created and copyrighted. It's called the Diversity Pedagogy Instrument. And it basically asks faculty members who would like to participate through an open access survey link, not through your individual email addresses, mind you, asks them what are the 3 courses that you teach most regularly, and how often or in what ways do those courses, or if at all, involve diversity. And then we kind of take you through a number of questions that we would also want to run through your Campus IRB as well, just to make sure it's all good. There's not much demographic questions on there. I don't think there are any at all, because we don't want faculty to feel as if they are being exposed in any way, or that, that they feel uncomfortable with. So that's something that I think really helps accentuate kind of this data. And then last but not least, in addition to looking at all of the course information, we actually want to know, how often do you offer these diversity related courses? So we do a schedule analysis. We look at the last 5 to 6 semesters in terms of the diversity courses and how often they were offered, how many sections, how many quote unquote seats in each section. And we call that a schedule analysis, because if you have 30% of your entire curriculum is diversity related, but you're only offering 10% of them on a regular basis once a year, that gives us a very different portrait, and it gives us very meaningful information to talk to you all about your curricular offerings. One of the layers that we look at, and I know I can't go over all of this with you, but just some of the key points before I end the slidecast, is one of the layers that we use to analyze your diversity efforts is change order. And I spoke about this during my campus visit at the end of March. Change order really identifies the strategic sequence at which a university, a college is positioned. And it goes like this: first order, second order, third order, fourth order. It is progressive. The goal is to move along, closer to fourth order. But a lot of leadership asks me, what's the fastest way to fourth order and how much is it going to cost? And I guess for me, that's not the most important set of questions. What's important is, do you know where you are, and do you know where you want to be? So first order, for example, represents the foundation. It's when an institution declares its commitment to diversity and inclusion. So vision statements, mission statements, even strategic plans to some extent, where it describes the vision of diversity and inclusion. That's first order. Second order emanates from the first order, where it's really ultimately that commitment that's been declared is just demonstrated by some action, effort, or program. And that could be, financial aid, it could be kind of recruitment practices, it could be any kind of an actual effort or a program. Third order takes it up a notch, and third order is when you engage in that effort, action, or program, but you engage in it multiple times, and you also anchor it to a strategic goal or a framework. And here's the kicker: and that particular effort that's been engaged in regularly is showing signs of impact. And I didn't say the assessment word, I didn't say the A word, but impact could be known quantitatively, impact could be known qualitatively, that, this is making a difference. We are seeing more students interacting with each other. Our campus conversations are becoming deeper and richer and more complicated. Those are signs of impact. So however you choose to quote unquote measure or ascertain impact has to be known. And I think that's why we predominantly see institutions in first order and second order, or maybe a little bit in advanced second order, but not quite to third order. And it's because in the world of diversity and inclusion, we are not really looking at to what extent are these diversity efforts that we're doing over and over and over again, how are they changing our campus, or are they moving us in a direction that we want to be moved in, or that is positive for us? I think that sometimes diversity efforts are in a vacuum, or we do things because we've always done them. And we also have to think about strategy when it comes to diversity and inclusion. We have to think about where we strive to be and why. And that really takes it to kind of that level of third order. Fourth order is that kind of epiphany. It's that transformative, culture changing moment when you've engaged in these efforts. They're sustained, they're prioritized, they're institutionalized, meaning they're funded by base money, not one-time money, but it's something that's part of the deep fabric of, for example, the University of Alabama. And it's making that positive movement. It's making that positive impact for the future. And again, that these programs and efforts are fully resourced. They are a permanent part and staple of who you are. And we don't see a ton of fourth order efforts, but we will identify programs and efforts that we see as having fourth order potential. So what we'll do with this change order sequence here, and this is what it's called, is we'll really assign an order, a change order stage to every effort on the map. And then we're going to actually tell you at the very end of our analysis what overall change order stage we think the University of Alabama is at. Another layer, which is one of my favorites, is something called Delta. And I actually developed this along with two of my graduate students, gosh, in 2012. And it's the Diversity, Engagement, and Learning Taxonomy, which we call Delta. And it's a taxonomy that is very much an homage to Bloom's taxonomy, which I have used my entire instructional career, and I find it very useful. But we couldn't find a taxonomy that talked about diversity engagement in the classroom. So for example, when I'm explaining Gerd Hofstede's cultural patterns, that's a very different kind of course unit in my class than when I'm getting at issues of privilege and power and microaggressions, right? One unit takes maybe a few weeks, a number of activities, a number of readings. It's a really high cognitive demand. But the unit on privilege and power, positionality, and microaggressions takes many weeks, many simulations, many activities, many private journal debriefings. Just it's a very affective and cognitively demanding set of units, and we wanted to capture that in here. So this taxonomy Delta will be used to look at all of your campus events related to diversity. So what kind of diversity engagement are your events doing at the University of Alabama? Are you having conversations that are about power and positionality? Are you having conversations about cultural difference and or cultural commonalities? We find that to be important information to tell you. In addition, we'll be using this Delta sequence to look at every one of your courses. So we'll be identifying a Delta level. What's the highest Delta level that's being targeted, as we can see from the syllabus and any other documents that you allow us to see with your courses for each undergraduate and graduate course. Now, we can't answer the question which Delta level is being actually reached. What we can do is share a rubric with your faculty if they would like to, or even do a training down the road where we teach you about how to incorporate Delta as a kind of a instructional assessment tool or a learning rubric tool. And many of our past and former clients, even current clients, have been doing that and are doing that since we've done the mapping. So just to kind of walk you through a few examples of what our maps look like and the kind of information it tells you. This is kind of what it looks like in concept draw. They're actually very, very beautiful. They're going to be given to you as PDFs so that anyone can open them. You don't need special software. I mean, if you were to print any of our maps, they would be very, very tall. They would be 6 to 7 to 8 feet tall, depending on how big your campus is. Now, you're a larger campus, so your maps would be really, really big if we had to blow them up and print them. But we have them through Adobe PDFs where you can zoom in on an area, and we create several different maps to give you different views. Each map has a legend. If you take a look here, the blue bubbles or balloons actually indicate the division and the sub-program or subdivision. And then the little white strips down there on the left-hand side, each of those represents an effort. And then there's a few legend items that tell you a few of our analytical layers. Now, we didn't put all 23 to 25 of our analytical layers on the map. That's too much. We actually referred to kind of brain research in terms of processing, and you really can't process more than 5 layers at a time, visually and cognitively. So that's what we have for you. So change order are going to be those little numbers with the little circles. Delta are going to be the little numbers with the gray scale and the little numbers inside 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And actually, I should kind of go over, keep in mind that back in this Delta sequence, sorry to skip back and forth, it goes level 1 through level 7. And those are really scaffolding. So if you're at level 4, you're subsuming level 3, 2, and 1. If you're at level 7, you're subsuming them all, right? So we identify the highest level that you're reaching, but that it does incorporate the ones below. And look, The lower engagement levels are things like knowledge awareness, the building of intercultural skills, interaction. The higher engagement levels are advanced analysis, perspective taking. Level 5 is really key because that's really when you're getting at issues of power, inequalities, positionality. Level 6 is when you're actually thinking about advocacy and allies, but also how do we design the world and solve problems and create decisions and actions that are benefiting us as a community in relation to our critiques about diversity. And then innovation, problem solving, multiple heuristics. Sorry for that. So that's what the Delta sequence 1 through 7 looks like. And then we have a number of other aspects and layers. Where does the effort start? Does it start at the program? Is it program driven? Is it student initiated? Is it university wide? And our maps, when you zoom in, look really much, much more closer about it. You'll see, again, those white strips are really the actual individual efforts, their names, and then specifically some of the layers that we'll be presenting on. We have a map that shows the different themes, were they clubs and organizations, were they co-curricular, were there committees? So it organizes it quite nicely, and it's often kind of compared to an infographic that it shares what we've done. So you can see level 2, right, for this institution, the blue circles with the number 2 in it, that those were actions that were emanated from commitments that were declared by the institution about their focus on diversity and inclusion. And I believe this campus, we didn't see a lot of 3s because they had not determined the impact or if it was moving them in the direction they wanted to. And that needs to be done, because if it's not moving the direction that you want to, then should that effort be suspended, or should the effort be retooled and done over? We do things like time series analyses. We actually try to identify the year or years that every diversity effort has happened, so we can see how many diversity efforts you've done over the years. We can make it a little bit more complicated and look at not only what's being done in each year, but in terms of which 4 top definitions of culture and diversity. So you could see broad culture and diversity, diversity in general or broadly, was happening in terms of more of them, but that there was some movement in some of the other definitions of culture. We also are going to want to see how many of your efforts are actually university-wide or tied to larger initiatives, which often comes out of strategic plans. How many were program-driven? And that's really a cost-sharing sustainability issue, is that if every individual program is doing something on diversity efforts, which is great, you're all, as long as you're pointing your sales in the right direction, but then you're depleting individual budgets. Is there a better way to cost share and to make sure that you all are kind of congruent and coherent and cohesive on that direction in some other way? How many of your efforts are actually student initiated, which we frame as largely student clubs and organizations, because they do a great deal in terms of their efforts, their community work, their programs. They're such wonderful resources, student clubs and organizations, I believe, in helping college completion and issues of inclusion for students. And so we'll be looking at your student clubs and organizations. Again, we're going to look at your overall change order stage. Is it predominantly at the first order or the second order? We even can cross connect, kind of like a visual crosstabs out of SPSS, each layer against one another. So if we wanted to look at how many of your efforts or what percentage of your efforts were in second order and according to which main definitions of culture of diversity, we can do that. And I think that's one of the values added of our mapping methodology, is we scrape everything. We pull all information in, because if at any point in time there's an interesting relationship that shows up between this layer and this layer, we can splice them across each other. We can look to see if you have more diversity-related events than initiatives, which often happens at your campus. What are the different kinds of diversity efforts that are happening at the University of Alabama? We want to see the type of diversity represented. Is it based on compositional diversity, which, to some extent, every institution is going to have that? Is it going to be based on inclusion or getting people to the table? Is it also based on active diversity or making sure people are engaging in cultural exchanges or sharing perspectives, or is it really focused on social justice? We want to know how much of what you do is focused on social justice and to what extent. In addition, we want to look at the framings of diversity in your efforts. We also do this for courses. So here's what we do. We look at every effort and we code up to 4 different definitions of diversity that are being targeted in that effort. And we love that because an effort can really focus on religion, gender, socioeconomic class status, and race all at once. And that way we code them, we compile them, and then we can tell you which definitions of diversity are getting more exposure or are being engaged more. And what we find a lot is that depending on the campus and the region, race and ethnicity, gender, broad culture diversity, international, global, we also find that oftentimes disabilities, um, active duty veterans, even sexual orientation, uh, age, generation are sometimes not as widely engaged. So, we'll have to see what happens in terms of your campus and what we find. We look to see if campuses are focusing their efforts on a specific group or if it's just framed for a general or a mainstream audience. And that really tells us also about retention and graduation initiatives. So we're going to look at those things. We can look at all of your events that happen on your campus, and we know how much academic affairs and especially student affairs. I mean, student affairs for us over the years, we know how much heavy lifting they do. And I so value that. I so value that in what student affairs brings to us on a campus. And so we're going to look at all of the events across the campus, and we'll look at the events that happen every year that are annual events, cultural heritage celebrations, maybe your specific graduations for specific historically underrepresented groups. What does that tell us? What do the one-time events tell us in terms of definitions of diversity being engaged and the recurring events? We're going to look at what your efforts do in terms of the function of the effort and for which target population. Is it to expose and inform, and for whom? Is it to develop them in terms of their skills, and for whom? Those are the particular kinds of areas that we look at. We'll look at recruitment, and if there's a recruit function, what are the target populations of that recruit function? And curricularly, we have some special layers as well. We can look at the class level of all of your courses and how definitions of culture are being engaged. So I love this because 100 level for this campus was the Frosh, quote unquote, first year native level. And so in that level, it was predominantly broad culture diversity, international, global, and religion that was being engaged. Isn't that interesting? And then intersectionalities towards the end. But if you look at the other levels, you see at the 400 level, it's predominantly broad culture diversity. It's also predominantly language and religion. You only see in the 300 and a little bit in the 200 level that they're getting at aspects of disability. They're getting aspects of race and ethnicity and purple. So we can tell you this information. We can look at the spread of culture in your undergraduate curriculum. Is it focused on international, global, domestic, or both? We see that many campuses think that they're doing everything that they can about diversity by only focusing on the international, global. And I believe in that well-rounded curriculum where we're focused on domestic aspects of diversity and, of course, the global aspects. And I do think those two are connecting. But I also think they're also rigidifying the domestic structural inequalities of our specific racial, gender, and socioeconomic class politics here in our country. Again, we'll look at the framings of diversity. We code up to 4 different aspects for each course. We'll look at if there's an EMIC or an ETIC kind of focus on culture. Is it culture general or culture specific? What's the temporality of culture? Is culture or diversity focused on historically, which we find to be very important? Is it focused on in terms of contemporary issues, or both, or a healthy blend? What about how often you offer your diversity-related courses? Is it a significant portion? So if you see here an undergraduate, the green represents what's not offered. The blue represents what is offered. So this campus, they were offering a great deal of their diversity-related courses, which was huge, which was a rare finding. And that's based on our enrollment analysis and schedule analysis. from the diversity pedagogy instrument that is to be IRB approved, of course, um, we found that 80% of the faculty at this particular campus wanted more training, and they told us what training on that instrument. And they told us uh, their top inclusive pedagogical techniques that they used in 50% of their course. We asked what they use in 25% of the course, 50% of the course, or in the entire course. And so those are some of the things that we can tell you. Those are just some of the layers. We have many, many more. And oftentimes we get inspired by all of you campuses when we see something really interesting and we're like, we need a layer. We need a new analytical layer to examine that, to give voice to that. And so that's going to be really exciting to look at your campus. Other analytical tools is we're now starting to move towards graduation and retention effort mappings. And we're doing that actually, we're mapping the entire Indiana University system um, and doing diversity mappings for them, as we've already done that, as well as graduation retention mappings. And we also do diversity benchmarkings where oftentimes we don't know where we are in relation to our peers in terms of what we're doing with diversity efforts and programs. We have a database. We've had a database for about 5 years or so that allows us to kind of rank where you are quantitatively and qualitatively with designated peers on specific diversity efforts, programs, themes and indices. And we really get great qualitative data for our campuses to use about what other campuses are doing. And not that we should copy or emulate anybody else, because you are who you are unique. But it does kind of make you think about, they're doing it this way. That wouldn't really work here, but I like their focus on this. I wonder what we could do. It just kind of gets the brainstorming going. We try to keep track of our client success trends. This is a little bit of a more dated breakdown. We're working on a newer one where we looked at 30 of our past clients. And I'm happy to say that a large percentage, if not all of them, have moved into a diversity strategic planning phase, have created diversity infrastructure. We keep track of our past clients to make sure that they're using the mapping for what it is. And if this tells you anything, we have kept relationships with every one of our wonderful clients. They're part of our family. I speak to many of those diversity leaders every year, time and time again, and I respect them so much. And we have that kind of a relationship. We want to create a relationship with you as a campus. We don't just want to leave the door and leave you hanging, but we really feel strongly that this work, and we want this work, and we really push for this work to be used for action and strategy, and to have targeted strategy. Our timeline for the University of Alabama is I made a visit. I had a wonderful visit out there at the end of March. I met with a number of you, so many of you, and what a great campus community you have. What a beautiful campus you have. Met with your leadership, found your leadership to be extremely engaged, and find this to be extremely important. That's the message I have been getting all along. And you all and your Jennifer Greer in particular reached out to me based on kind of a meeting, a virtual meeting through Higher Education Research Institute. In April and May, we've already started on preparing the organizational outline. We do an organizational outline of the University of Alabama to make sure we have all of your divisions right. So we're actually almost done with that. I have sent forward the informational survey and the diversity pedagogy instrument to Jennifer Greer for hopefully getting it into your IRB pipeline. So we're on track. We're preparing everything we need to do to go ahead and get started. This summer, we actually want to start web scraping and doing a document analysis of your diversity efforts. We read thousands of documents per campus, thousands. And we'll have a Dropbox created that has an email address on the informational survey that's to be approved by IRB, where if people wanted to email a document that gives us information, you could just send it to a Dropbox, no problem. We don't want you to create anything new. If you already had it created and it's already in existence, perfect. We don't want a workload on you. And we will have all of the information about your annual reports and all that good stuff. So in the fall, or even sometime in the summer, we're hoping to actually send you that open access web link, keep it open through the fall, finish that data collection, and then the winter, early spring to finalize the mapping analysis, I'll come back, share the findings and the recommendations, and then let you kind of hone in on your next steps, whether that's um, a climate survey, whether that's a more targeted diversity strategy. I can kind of help in that area. What we're going to need are some things that we'll get from your leadership in terms of events and trainings and workshops. Outcome data will pull, anything else that you think is really important in terms of key documents. What you can do in particular is, please fill out voluntarily, of course, the diversity efforts survey link that we send out. If you're a faculty member, we'd love for you to participate in the diversity pedagogy instrument and to kind of spread the word. And I guess at this point, I can't really answer any questions or comments, but I'm really thrilled to be working with you all and to go on this journey with you all and to really apply this mapping methodology, which looks at your record of diversity activity. And I know it's not a campus climate survey data, but we do think that this kind of research, which is really about mapping institutional actions, which is a different kind of research, we really find that to be extremely important to helping you in your next steps. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, you can email me at Rona, R-O-N-A, at Halualani, HALUALANI.com. You can also get that email address from Dr. Jennifer Greer. Thank you very much.